Welcome to Solving Equations. Today we're going to take a look at how to solve basic one-step equations. The first thing we do is we recognize what operation that is. That says plus 5. The opposite of adding something is subtracting, and vice versa. And the opposite of multiplying something is division. These are the only 4 operations you'll ever see. Add, subtract, multiply, divide. Multiplication is the opposite of division. Division is the opposite of multiplication. Addition is the opposite of subtraction. And subtraction is the opposite of adding. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do opposites. The opposite, I'm going to draw a line right here. I highlighted my plus 5. The opposite of plus 5 is a negative 5. And what I do to one side of the line, I'm going to do to the other side of the line. Now I'm going to solve up and down. Notice I didn't do anything with my A. So I'm going to bring it straight down. This cancels out. That makes a big fat 0. And 14 minus 5 is 9. So A equals 9. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to double check it. I'm going to write over here A equals 9. Ask yourself, does 9 plus 5 equal 14? Yes, it does, so you know you're right. The great thing I love about these is you can always check your math. There's no reason to get any of them wrong. If you hear weird noises, it's because I have cows outside. I'm on a farm. Okay. Number 2. I'm going to take my highlighter. I'm going to highlight minus 13. I'm going to draw my line where the equation is. And now I'm going to solve. The highlight tells me what I'm going to take the opposite of. The opposite of negative 13 is a positive 13. What I do to one side, I have to do, there we go, do to the other side. And now I can solve. I did not do anything to the t, my variable, so I bring that down. That's what I'm looking for. Negative 13 and a positive 13 give me a big fat 0, so I don't do anything. And 33 plus 13. 3 plus 3 is 6, and 3 plus 1 is 4. My answer is T equals 46. Now let's go back and check it. I'm going to, if T, they're loud today. If T equals 46, that's where I'm going to put my 46 in for my T. Back into my original problem, minus 13 equals 33. And does 46 minus 13, 6 minus 3 is 3, 4 minus 1 is 3. Yes, it does. So there's my answer. I always have my students put a square, circle, something around the answer so I can tell what the answer is. Okay, number 3. Once again, I go to my highlighter. I highlight. Now this says minus R. Well, Mrs. Chapman, there's no number there. How am I supposed to add or subtract? I'm going to show you. I first put my line down my equation so I know what to do on both sides. I don't get that mixed up. I keep that in line. The great thing about opposites is the opposite is always, it doesn't matter if it's a number or variable. It's the opposite. What's the opposite of any negative number? The opposite of any negative number is its positive number. So the opposite of negative R is positive R. If I add R to one side, I have to add R to the other side. Well, wait a second. How can I add R? I don't know what R is. Watch. These are the easiest. Now I can solve. Did I do anything to the 12? Nope. So I bring it straight down. Negative and a positive, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's a negative R and a positive R, that means it's the exact same thing. It cancels out. And anything plus 0 is always itself. So my answers are 12 equals R. 12 equals R. And I circle my answer. But wait a second, the variable's up here on the left. It's okay to have the variable on the right. It still means that everywhere I see an R, I'm going to plug in a 12 because R equals 12. Now, if you like it written as R equals 12, it means the exact same thing. So it's okay to write that. Well, how do I plug it back into my answer? Well, anywhere I see an R, I'm going to put a 12. So let's see here. 12 minus, instead of the R equals 12. Does 12 minus 12 equal 0? Yes, it does. I like those. Those are the easiest ones because there's not a lot of adding or subtracting working with numbers. You're just basically moving stuff around. Okay, let's go on to the next one. I don't see any addition or subtraction here. I see a variable. The first thing I need to look for is the variable because that's what I'm looking for. So I go ahead and I say, well, there's no signs. There's no operations. There's no adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. Remember, anytime you see a number or a constant and a variable pushed next to each other, it means to multiply. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little dot there so I know I'm multiplying. And I highlighted it. Now, what's the opposite of multiplication? The opposite of multiplication is division. And draw my line. The opposite of multiplying by 9 is dividing both sides by 9. 9 divided by 9 is 1. Notice how that 1 canceled it out. Okay, so I'm left with just a G. And 63 divided by 9 is 7. So 7 equals a G. Everywhere I see a G, I'm going to put a 7. Let's go back and try that. Back to my original problem. 63, like the hot pink, equals 9 times 7. Well, 9 times 7 equals 63. So it works. Very good. Number 5. I'm looking at the 2 on the 42. Let's try this one. Let's try some red. Okay. I'm going to get out my highlighter. But I'm looking at the variable and there's nothing on this side of the equation because when I draw my line, there's nothing on that side of the equation. When you have a variable all alone, you don't have to do opposites. Isn't that wonderful? So I don't even really need a line there. Go ahead and put my equal sign back. And all I have to do is solve. What's 42 divided by 7? Anybody? It is 6. Very good. Now, if I plug this back in, does 62, or does 6, keep saying that 2, equal, now I don't write the 2, divided by 7? Yes, it does. So you can still check those answers. Okay, next one. I find my variable. My variable right here is connected through an operation. It's not all by itself. I'm going to put my line, and then I'm going to highlight, and that's divided by 4. If we look on page 1, the opposite of dividing is multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. The opposite of dividing by 4 is multiply by 4. I like to use the dots now that I'm using the variables because I could have an X in there and I don't want to mix it up. Okay, so I like to use the dot. Good old trustworthy dot. Now, I divide by 4. The opposite of dividing by 4 is multiplying by 4. So they cancel it out. Let me show you why they cancel out. Anytime I have a number, I have a whole number, it's always over 1. If I divide by 4, okay, let's take this for example. How do I solve that problem? Well, the first thing I do is I rewrite my problem. 4 over 1, write my first number. I change the division to multiplication, and then I flip the second problem. That's called a reciprocal. And when I divide, they cancel each other out to give me 1. So that's why I can say the opposites equal 1. Okay? Because technically, I wrote this like this because it's kind of like a little shortcut. But this is what we're really doing, or this is what we're thinking in our head. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides by 4. Let me get a darker color here. 4 times 10 is 40, and my h is all by itself. Well, that means 40 equals h. Everywhere I see an h, I'm going to plug a 40. So let's see if it works. Plug it back into the original problem. 10 equals 40 divided by 4. Is 40 divided by 4 10? Yes, it is. So I know my answer's correct. Oh my gosh. There's decimals. I can't do this without decimals. Yes, you can. Same exact steps. Exactly. I find my variable. I'm going to highlight my variable. It's a plus h. Once again, we're not given a number, but we're not worried about that because we know our opposites. I'm going to draw my line straight down so I know what I do to one side, I have to do the other side. The opposite of positive h is a negative h. And what I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other side of the equation. Okay, let's take a look here. I did not do anything. Now I solve vertically. I did not do anything to the 1.2, so I solve 1 point, bring it down. I don't solve anything, I just bring it down. This equals a big fat 0, so I cancel that out. And I have 3.0, which is technically 3, minus h. But I didn't solve anything. Wait a second. How did I do that? I did everything I was supposed to do. All I did was bring the h over to the other side. Wait a second. I didn't get h equals anything. What do I need to do? I'm going to go back. And because of that, we're going to do the 1.2. Let me go back and rewrite this problem. And you will come across problems like that. It was a positive h equals. Okay. Now I want to show you back here. Notice we were able to do it here because this was just a simple r. Okay, so all we did was move the r to the other side, or that was a 0. Okay, but when you have something, a number other than 0 on the other side, don't be mistaken. Where's my number? It's a 1.2. It doesn't have a sign in front of it, so I assume it's a positive. The opposite of positive 1.2 is a negative 1.2. So I really want you to focus on the numbers. Okay? If there's no number here, now you can see why you need to focus on the numbers. If I subtract by 1 2/10 on this side, I have to subtract by 1 2/10 on this side. But Mrs. Chapman, I can just write 3. Yeah, you could write 3. I'm fine with that. But you're going to make a mistake. You're going to make a silly mistake. We don't want to make silly mistakes. Why would I make a silly mistake? It's because it's important to line up the decimals. Okay. We're going to get back to that in a second. A positive 1.2 and a negative 1.2 make a big fat 0. I bring down my h. My h is positive, so that's good. We'll get into another lesson with that when it's negative. We don't want to deal with that. Okay. Now I need to borrow. I can't take 2 from 0, and this is why you have to keep it a 3.0. You have to line up the decimals. I'm going to borrow 1 from the 3, which makes that a 2. 10 minus 2 is 8. I bring my decimal straight down, and 2 minus 1 is 1. So now I have h equals 1 8/10. I'm going to circle my answer, but I better go back and check it. My original problem is 1.2 plus 1.8. 8 plus 2 is 10. Carry the 1. Bring my decimal straight down, and I get a 3.0, or a 3. So yes, my answer is correct. Now on to the next one. Number 8. Get my highlighter. I have a negative 0.5, or negative 5/10. I'm going to draw my line down the equation so I know what I do to one side, I do the other side. What's the opposite of a minus 5/10? It's a positive 5/10. And the more you use your vocabulary, the easier it will get. So try not to say 0.5, okay? Okay. If I add 5/10 to one side, I have to add 5/10 to the other side. It's very important to line up my decimals because I bring my decimal down. 5 plus 2 is 7, and 0 plus 0 is 0. I did not do anything with the v, so I'm going to bring the v straight down. This equals a big fat 0. And I have v equals 7/10. Let's go back and check it. I'm going to plug my 7/10 in for v. So 7/10 minus 5/10. 7 minus 5 is 2. Bring my decimal straight down, and 0 minus 0 is 0. So I'm going to circle my answer knowing it is correct. Okay, let's take a look at this one. Now, Miss Chapman, I'm going to go ahead and highlight, but that says positive J. Do we remember on the last one? If there's no number here and there's no 0 here, we have to highlight our number. And when there's no sign in front of it, it's always a positive. So I need to draw my line down the equation. And a positive 8 8/10 is a negative 8 8/10. And to balance out my sides, what I do to one side, I have to do the other side. Make sure you line up that decimal. If you don't line up the decimal, you're going to make a silly mistake and get the number wrong. And I'd hate to see you do all that work for getting the number wrong. Okay, my positive 8 8/10 and negative 8 8/10 make a big fat 0. I bring down my positive j. Remember, you have to make sure it's positive. I don't think right now you're going to see any negatives. We'll see. Okay, and I'm subtracting. I can't take away 8 from 7, so I have to borrow. I still can't take away. What does that do? 17 minus 8. Now notice, I'm going to borrow the 18. So 1 less than 18 is 17. 17 minus 8 is 9. And once again, 17 minus 8 is 9. Let's plug it back in. We're going to plug our answer back in to J. Positive 8 8/10 plus 9 9/10 equals 7. Bring my decimal straight down. 9 plus 8 is 17, plus 1 is 18. 18 and 7/10 is our answer, so I know J equals 9 9/10. Are you ready for a word problem? Word problem. Read the problem first. Underline the question. The temperature was 78 degrees Fahrenheit. A cold front moved in, and the temperature dropped to 54 degrees. 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Solve the equation 78 minus D equals 54 to find the drop in temperature. So I'm going to solve this equation here. That's all they want you to do. Solve the equation. It's a drop, so it's minus. I'm going to write the problem. 78 minus D equals 54. And go up here. I'm going to draw my line. Minus D. Well, there's not a 0 on the other side, so I can't highlight the minus D. I have to highlight the number. When there's no sign in front of it, it's always a positive. Positive 78, the opposite is negative 78. And I draw my line. This equals 0. Cancel that out. I bring down my minus D. Minus D? Uh-oh. You know what? Mrs. Chapman has a better way of doing this. I don't like doing it this way. I don't like having a minus D. I don't like negative variables. So let's go back and rewrite the problem. 78 minus D equals 54. Give it a red. Okay. Problem. There's no number here, so I know I have to do the opposite with a number. But I'm not going to do that right now. I don't want a negative D. Mrs. Chapman just said, I don't like negative Ds. They're ugly. They're very, very ugly. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this first. What's the opposite of a minus D? The opposite of subtracting is adding. So I'm going to add a D to this side, and I'm going to rewrite my whole problem. I'm going to bring down 78. This cancels out, and I know it's written vertical, but I'm going to write it horizontal. put an equal sign here. 54 plus D. I like that. Much better. Much, much better. Now that I have a positive variable, I can go ahead and solve. I look for my number. Now let me draw my line. I look for my number on the side with the variable. It's always been on the left side. Now it's on the right side. That can confuse some kids, so be careful. I have a positive 54. Go ahead and write positive 54. The opposite of positive 54 is a negative 54. And what I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. Now let's go. I bring my D down. I'm running out of space. This equals a big fat 0. And 70, now I can do this, 78 minus 54. This is a lot easier. 8 minus 4 is 4, and 7 minus 5 is 2. So D equals 24. So what happened? Well, before we talk about what happened, let's plug it back into the problem. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm going to plug it back into the original problem, 24. Does 78 minus 24, I'm sorry, yes, 78 minus 24. 8 minus 4 is 4, and 7 minus 2 is 5. It matches the degrees it dropped to. So let's talk about what happened. It actually, and you have to put this in words. A lot of teachers are going to ask you to put your explanation in words of what happened in the equation. It was 78 degrees, but it dropped 24 degrees, so it's now 54 degrees. I hope that makes sense. If you still don't understand, make sure you ask your teacher. Okay, let's go on to this one. Number 11. Number 1, rule of thumb. Read the problem. Alyssa can cut out the pieces of cloth to make 4 pillows in 1 hour. Solve the equation 4h equals 20 to find how many hours Alyssa needs to cut cloth for 20 pillows. Once again, they're asking, solve the equation. What does H stand for? How many hours? So now we're starting to see our variables stand for something. I didn't do this on the last one. I'm doing this on this one. Your H stands, for the number of hours. So we're actually looking for the number of hours it takes. I'm going to write my problem. 4h equals 20. I like green and purple. Draw my line. Where's my highlighter? If you heard that, that was the dryer. The 4 and the H are squished together. The 4 and the H are squished together. I don't see a sign, so that means I'm going to multiply. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. I'm going to divide by 4 on both sides. 4 divided by 4 is 1. See that 1? It's kind of slanted. And I have H all by itself, which I'm trying to find the number of hours. And 20 divided by 4 is 5. Well, let's plug it back into the problem and see if it works. I have 4 times 5 hours equals 20. And I'm right. So my answer, word problems, you have to know what you're looking for. I always make my students tell me what they're looking for. The number, I'm looking for 5 hours. That way, it'll make more sense to them. And the last word problem. Jean Conrad is an amateur bowler with an average score of 187. She recently bowled a perfect 300 score. Awesome. Write an equation that can be used to find out how much the perfect score was above her average score, and then solve the equation. So they want us to write an equation that can be used to find out how much the perfect score was above her average score, then solve the equation. So there's 2 steps here. Write an equation, solve the equation. There's a couple different ways we can do this. We want to find out how much is the difference between something, 2 numbers. How much, the difference, the perfect score, it's not a very straight line, the perfect score of 300 was above her average score of, why is that decimal there, 187. But we need to write an equation, okay, in order to solve this. So what we're going to do is, because we're finding out how much, if her average score was, technically we could say 300 minus 187, and that will tell us the difference between her other score, or x. Okay, so that's one equation we can do. And 300 minus 187, borrow the 10, that turns into 29. The 30 turns into 29. 10 minus 7 is 3. 9 minus 8 is 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. So we know the difference is 113. But the thing is, none of our equations in this section look like this. We need to write an equation and then solve it. We need to get our answer to 113. So how do we do that? Well, here I subtracted 187. And remember, if I want to get the 187 over to this side of the equation, I have to add 187. So my equation will look like this. X plus 187 equals 300. Notice, I took what I knew and I applied it to what I'm doing. Okay? I'm going to say that again. I took what I knew, is that I have to find the difference between the 2 numbers. I know in order to do that, it's 300 minus 187, but I need to write an equation. If I need the 187 to be on the other side, I have to do the opposite, which is add 187. So now I have my equation. Okay? So let's go ahead and solve. I don't like Christmas colors. Okay, here we go. Don't get me wrong, I like Christmas. Okay. Now I'm going to take my highlighter. This is a positive 187. The opposite of positive 187 is minus 187. And now I can solve. I bring down my x, and you can use any variable you want. Positive 187 and negative 187 equals 0, so I cross that out. And then I solve, and I already solved it, so I know that I already solved it up here, so I know that x equals 113. Now, if you wrote the equation like this and left it like that, as a teacher, I would mark it wrong. The reason being is because we're looking for a variable to solve. So I could have a variable plus 187 equals 300 would be able. Or if I want to take all of this and put it on and switch sides, I could also have 300 equals a variable plus 187. That would be acceptable. Same thing All I did was put them on different sides. I kept all the signs the same though. I could also have 300 equals 187 plus x. Notice I still have a positive 187 and a positive x. It's all the same. I'm still going to get to the same answer. But this right here, if you just left it at that, that's unacceptable because that's not an equation. Even though it has an equal sign, it's still not an equation. Okay, if you have any questions, make sure you ask your teacher or ask them below on YouTube. I'll get back to them as soon as I can. I check them every night. Have a good day.